For assignment number 4, I really don't think you're going to need a lot of tips because you're doing exactly what you've been doing in the last few assignments, creating variables and making them output to the screen. I do have a couple tips that I've seen people do. And of course, if you need more help than this, you can always ask in person. So, if we go over to idle and we start typing, you're going to make variables again, and so you're going to make some sort of name variable, and my name is blah blah. And then the next one is called the class. That's what we would call it in a game like Dungeons and Dragons, like the fighter is a class, or anything like that, sorcerer. I hope that you have fun making it crazy classes that don't really exist in any sort of game. But you're going to say, oh, Mr. Steen wants this to be called a class. So you say class equals fighter, and then you say, wait. Why is this colored like that? So there's certain words that you'll have to remember are keywords in Python, and you can't use those words when you actually go and try to create variables. See here, I get an error when I try to do that. Class is a special reserved name that has to do with a fancy programming language part of Python called object-oriented programming that uses classes to do its code. And so that's one that they're not going to let us use. So what do? Well, perhaps you just say my class instead. That's fine to say. Perhaps you say, I'm going to spell class with a Z. Any of those options are fine. So anything that you think is the way to do it, when you go to print it, just make sure that you match what's going on up here. And then it will work. Then the next part is, you're supposed to make logic, and you're supposed to make magic, and you're supposed to make strength, and you're thinking, I don't want to type strength. Like maybe even these, you're like, I'll just call it log, I'll call it mag, so I'll call it strength. Ooh, that's weird, that just turned purple. So is that going to work if it's purple? Oh, well, first of all, I made a mistake in the print. Now notice I didn't print much, but it does work, even though this thing is purple. This is actually a keyword as well, but you're allowed to reuse this keyword if you want to. Now the problem is if you actually need this keyword in your code, then what are you going to do? Because now you've assigned it to a variable. This keyword has to do with strings when you want to make something a string. So if I wanted to say print a string of the number, let's see, that's confusing, but print a string of the number 25, str here is what Python uses to say force this to become a string. Another one that you could do, for instance, is force something to become an integer. So if I say this is 30.3, but I force it to become an integer, it's going to take off the 0.3 and it's going to round it. So it's not a good idea to use this. So if you see it turn purple, you really should use something else. So it's just kind of best practices to avoid those. See, then I get into this and it gives me weird errors about str25. Oh, I keep yawning, I'm sorry. And yeah, so that's really the only tips is watch what you're calling your things. It's always better to call it something long, even though it seems like it's a pain to type out, because you want to remember what it is. So good coders use good names for their variables.